make sure to follow us on Instagram at Whistlethrowers. It's a great way to interact with our show. Our DMs are always open for questions, topic discussions, and more. You will be able to find our new episodes and other announcements there. Trey Turner is a Philadelphia Philly.
Thanks for checking into the Whistlethrowers podcast again. This is Jack Mubarak, joined by
Jack Slaymaker.
And we got a lot of sports topics to talk about. Let's start with the NFL. There were just a bunch of storylines on the field, off the field, guys coming into the league, potentially coming back. Let's start off with Baker Mayfield. I know you're you're looking at me like we're starting off with him again, but John Wolford is looking questionable to doubtful for this game coming up. Matthew Stafford obviously isn't playing. I don't know who their fourth string is, but it looks like Baker Mayfield is going to play like straight off of the waiver wire this week. So what are your expectations?
I don't really have high expectations for him at all. Baker Mayfield is a guy who his struggles in the league, I don't think Baker is a great quarterback or anything. I don't think his skill set is much, but a lot of his downfall has been attested to poor pieces around him as well. I think that the beginning of his Browns career was shaky because the Browns didn't really have a great team. Their O-line wasn't great. And although they did have OBJ and, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on his name, Jarvis Landry, they struggled to stay on the field at times. And it was just very bumpy for him. And then obviously what happened. He gets traded. Carolina is a dumpster fire right now as it is. So there was really no path for him to succeed this year. And I don't really see that changing in LA. So I don't really expect much. I expect Carolina, Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, Cooper isn't playing either. He's still injured, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's no silver lining for him.
Yeah, right. I mean, Cam Akers did look pretty good last week, though, in the Seahawks game. So, that's something for them, for the Rams at least, to build on next year. Maybe they can get healthy a little bit. They don't have their high draft pick. They won't have that.
Yeah, I will say this makes the Thursday night game way more interesting than it would have been if John Wolford was playing.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, bring Baker. Look, I've been a huge defender of Baker his entire career. I really thought that the Browns were holding him back, considering that he got them to their first playoff appearance in something like 20 years. And then they sort of just bailed on him the first chance they got, which was totally disrespectful on the Browns, which we'll probably get into them as well, considering everything that happened. But with Baker, this was his first big opportunity. I get that the Panthers really struggled this year, but Baker did not look good either. He only passed for a little over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Just did not look like the quarterbacks was expecting him to be this year. And maybe he does something with the Rams to at least prove he gets another job. Maybe if Matt Stafford doesn't come back, because it sounds like his injury could be potentially really bad for his career going forward, considering Stafford's age and all that. So maybe this will prove that Baker deserves another shot, but that's about it from me that I see with this signing. It's just another added quarterback for depth. The fact that they picked him after Wolford gets hurt shows that the Rams weren't really that high on him at all as well. So, yeah, I sort of agree with Jack a lot that I just don't see a lot coming for Baker with this signing.
Yeah, and it does. You're right. It does look like Stafford's injury's going to be more serious than they initially thought. It sounds like he's going to need either back or neck surgery this coming off season.
Right, and Peyton Manning got that too, and it didn't necessarily derail his career, but he did miss an entire season.
Right, yeah.
And the Rams are only a year out of a Super Bowl run. They now have an injured quarterback, which totally derailed their season with everything else that was going wrong. And I have total faith in Sean McVay to get things right.
Yeah.
I just don't know if Baker's the quarterback that you want to go with. And the thing is, the Rams are 3-9 right now. If you tank with a 3-9 record, you could get a top 5 quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that could be something that's on their radar if they realize that Stafford's injury might be a season-long one or potentially longer than that. We just don't know at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you guys. I think this is just going to be an opportunity for him to show that, he's not absolutely cooked and he can get a job somewhere else. I hope he does get a job somewhere else because I still kind of have a little bit of faith in him, especially from what I saw that playoff run with Cleveland, but we're going to have to see. He's not getting any help from that team outside of Cam Akers, really. So, but it does make a better storyline for Thursday night.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That's something we could take away from it.
Yeah.
Transitioning, though, the Dallas Cowboys are not as confident as they were a couple weeks ago with OBJ. It looks like they're not going to sign him because they think that he's not in game shape and won't be until next season. And that was a shock for all of us because the Cowboys looked like the front runner to land him for a while, and they seem to back off. So do you guys see him signing with another team? Or do you think he's actually not ready to go?
I would be shocked if he doesn't sign with the team, even if he's not ready till next season. Because OBJ proved when he got traded to the Rams that he is still an elite receiver. Maybe not elite to where he was at the beginning of his career with the Giants. Injuries definitely impacted that. But he still showed that he can lead a team as a 2 or 3 wide receiver. And a lot of teams need a 2 or 3 right now. So I do think that teams will be looking at him. I would sign him personally. I understand that he might not be ready till next season, but at least you have him under contract for this year. You know that you won't be competing with other teams in next offseason when he is ready for gameplay. So I think that with all the information that's come out, it seems like he hasn't been putting in the work this season that he should have been with getting game ready. But also you have to remember that an ACL injury, it affects players completely different. Some guys come back really quickly, other guys don't. And OBJ's had a lot of injuries already, so that probably impact as well, where he was just focusing on rehab rather than getting game ready, which is totally understandable as long as he was rehabbing. I haven't seen any reports that he wasn't rehabbing. I just saw that he wasn't game ready. So that just tells me that the injuries was a bigger setback than people thought it was going to be originally, which is totally fine and acceptable. I do think that he should be signed this year if teams want to have him under contract for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I'm now looking at teams like the 49ers, or maybe not now since Jimmy G is out, but definitely the Eagles at this point.
Yeah, right.
To sign him. Because Quez is great, but like having OBJ, I would put OBJ in front of Quez.
Right, yeah, right. 100%. And like the other thing OBJ can hope for is injuries, because we're getting down to the end of the season here, and like this is where a lot of guys injuries start to pop up here and there, and like Quez just hurt his shoulder and we don't really know how serious it is. It doesn't look like it's bad right now, but it's just a sign that like anything can happen at any time. You know, even Devontae or AJ can go down too. And that's just the Eagles. You know, everyone else has their issues too. You know, the 49ers have Debo and Brandon Ayuk. Those are important pieces for them that could go down with injury. And like, that's probably what OBJ's best chance to get in now is to fill in for an injured player at this point, because I think the Cowboys were a surefire thing. And like, now that they have backed out because of the injury concerns, I really feel like OBJ's, so like if a team is going to sign OBJ, it's going to be them taking a long shot on him because they're a little desperate. That's kind of where I'm at with this. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't get signed.
Yeah, I definitely think that the Cowboys like scared off like other teams.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm
just
at.
Like completely dropped.
Yeah.
I see where Aiden's saying I think it would be smart for a lot of teams to lock him down for like the next couple seasons with the possibility of him like returning to his Rams version of himself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So definitely something to think for a lot of teams. Like I'm thinking Vikings too would be a great team
Minnesota.
for him.
Yeah.
The other thing that teams could do is just sign next year to a 1-year prove-it deal.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what the Rams did as well, and he proved it until he got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see that happening as well, teams waiting until the offseason. But I would lock him down this year, like I said, not have to worry about it, but we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we'll move into the Texans-Browns game. So it was Deshaun Watson's first game in almost 2 years. And he played his former team, and he didn't come out looking too nice. He had 131 pass yards and 1 interception, no touchdowns. He wasn't really looking that great, and it's not like any of us are surprised because he missed almost 2 seasons of football. But
yeah, right.
Did you guys expect more from him?
Nah, honestly, I kind of expected a slow start for him, like performance wise. I didn't really expect him to come out and look like the player that he was before everything, because that player was an unquestionable top five quarterback in the NFL. And to get to that level after not playing for 2 years, it's nearly impossible. It would take a freak athlete to do that. So, seeing the struggles from him early in the game, and they didn't really go away throughout the game, I'm not really surprised about that. And for Cleveland, I think they're lucky they played Houston, a team that they could kind of roll over the mistakes and the setbacks that they had. But it's going to be interesting to see how he finishes through this stretch run, because I mean, if he plays like that, Cleveland is not going to make any noise coming down through the playoff hunt. But it is also possible at the same time that they do, because Watson could start playing better. He doesn't have to go back to what he was, but if he plays better and Cleveland sort of rallies around him, like, they could make noise in terms of trying to get that last playoff spot. It's probably out of reach at this point, but you never know. I've seen crazier, I feel like.
Yeah, no, they still definitely have a shot. The issue is for Watson, if his struggles continue, I don't see why the Browns would have any problem going back to Jacoby Brissett. Because Brissett played very, very well, all things considered. And the Browns, like you mentioned, Jack, they're still within the running. Yeah, it's a long shot, but 5-7 record at this point in the season with 7 wildcard spots left, that's not that bad of a position to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see the Browns going back to Brissett if Watson's struggles continue. As for the way Watson played, I expected a little bit more. Not anything crazy. Definitely not 300 passing yards, not like 4 touchdowns in the game. But I was expecting him to at least have a touchdown pass, maybe. Not look the way that he did. I mean, some of his passes were just unacceptable. I understand that you have an off game. You might not be with your receivers, have that connection that you would have had you played all the way through this point in the season. But still, some of those passes just at the ground, not anywhere near wide receivers, near running backs from 5-yard routes. It just looked really, really bad. And it makes you question if the Browns made the right decision to bring him into the season at this point.
Well, I just want to challenge one thing that you said, the possibility of Jacoby Brissett coming in. I think that there is no way in hell they're going to do that. I'm looking at like the Denver Broncos when I say this, like they're like in way too deep with this guy. They can't be paying him 40, 50 million to sit on the bench backing up whoever. I don't know who the backup on Denver is, but Deshaun Watson in no world. I know he has like 30 allegations of him harassing and possibly assaulting women, but you can't do that as a franchise if you dumped like $250 guaranteed $1 million into him. Like,
and I understand that, but here's the difference. The Broncos are toast right now. Like, they're not making the playoffs. The Browns have a legitimate shot at making the playoffs. So why would you stick with this quarterback who's not going to help you win games? From what we saw so far, obviously, I think Watson will improve. You want to make – the goal is always to make the playoffs. And I don't know if Watson can do that at this point. So why would you not go back to Brissett if winning games is your main priority?
Yeah, I kind of understand Aiden's point, but I also see your point, Jack, and I think Aiden's point is more logical, but your point, I think, is what the NFL team will do, because I think that if the coach benches Watson, the owner is going to get upset. The GM will be upset. They are the guys who signed that contract, and they're the ones that put their names behind all that money in that player. So I think that they would be really upset about that. And then you're just causing a ton of issues internally, which is never good for a team. So I think that the team and the organization will go with your route, Jack, because you're right. Paying all that money for Watson just to bench him on your most important stretch, it looks really bad, especially after everything that's happened.
Yeah, I don't think if you can't trust him to figure this out right now, making the playoffs to them, it shouldn't be that important because they literally had Jacoby Brissett, and they could have spent a little more money and tried to get someone else or even draft the guy. But it seems like getting Jacoby Brissett means you kind of forfeited the season. So it's not like they're losing out on a whole lot if they don't make the playoffs. So I think keeping him in will give him like a better shot of developing like in this part of his career.
Yeah. And I think like you're definitely right, and that's 100% how they're thinking, but it's going to be interesting how the fans respond to that, because like how do you sell that to your fans, like we're going to give up on this season because the rapist that we paid $250 million to is suspended for 13 games. Like it's just it's ridiculous. And like for me as a fan, if that happened to the Eagles, like I would be extremely upset, because why are we forfeiting the season for this guy, And like, it happened now, and like we can kind of see the Browns fans are like sort of blindly loyal. Like they'll just like the Browns because it's the Browns, and like that's not a shot. Like the Browns have an amazing fan base. The fact that they have stuck behind that organization for this long is beyond me. So like that's not a shot, but at the same time, like the Eagles would like protest a guy like Watson. I feel like
we had Vic. We had
true,
Vic.
but like they did. The Eagles fans were in an uproar when they got Vic, though, and like he had to prove it to himself. He had to prove to the city pretty much that he actually changed, which I mean he pretty much has now. And at the same time, Vic's was a little different because he didn't actually do the act of dogfighting. It just happened on his property, pretty much.
Yeah, Vic also he served his time.
Yeah.
That's the biggest difference to me.
Yeah.
Is that Vic was punished for what happened, not by the NFL, but by the actual court system of the United States.
Yeah. And like
where Watson is still in limbo in that regard.
Right. And like you look at how Vic handled that, post jail sentence, and like he handled that like a stand-up person. He took full accountability, and like he showed remorse, and then the actions after too, like he actually became a huge advocate for animal cruelty prevention and stuff like that. So like Vic was a stand-up guy, and then you look at how Watson has handled it, and like he's never apologized. Like he's been super just arrogant and pretentious with the whole situation. So like it's hard for me, and I think it would be hard for not only like a Philadelphia fan base, but like even a Boston or New York fan base. Like a guy like Watson would get a ton of hate from that pretty much. And like I think that the Browns are more like a college fan base where like they just love their team. And
Jack, you say that, but there was a lot of Eagles fans that wanted Watson.
Yeah, that is true.
There
too.
were a lot.
Yeah, that is true. And
like a lot. I don't think it's the fan base. I just think that's how NFL fans across the league are. They want the quarterback that they believe will get them to the playoffs. It doesn't matter what they do, as long as they are a good quarterback. That's all that matters to most NFL fans.
yeah,
It's not all NFL fans, because there were a lot of fans that were protesting Watson. There's been a growth of women NFL fans that adamantly against Watson going to any team, and still are. So there's this weird divide now of NFL fans about sort of the old school thinking of we can look past them as long as they're skilled, and newer wave NFL fans that will judge a quarterback and any NFL player by their character, not their skill.
Yeah.
Speaking of judging someone by their character and not their skill, our friend Ari reported today from Official Sports Place that Matt Araiza will not face any criminal charges for his allegations. And I'm just going to say this right away. Deshaun Watson is back in the NFL. I think you can literally do anything as long as you don't get put in a jail cell the rest of your life and come back into the NFL. So I don't think it's right. I don't think he should ever be in the NFL again, but I think we're going to see him as soon as next season.
That would be wild. And I mean, I hope no teams take a shot on this guy. I hope that, guys, like we really turn a leaf as a league, with how we handle these situations. Like, let's not put up with this kind of stuff anymore. And we can really start with this, Watson, I felt like was a step backwards, and like we can take another step forward with this and like let's just collectively blackball this guy from the league. You know, they may not be able to do it legally. You know, you might not be able to ban him from the league. I don't really know, but we can collectively all agree to say, let's not sign this guy. You know, I hope the owners and GMs and front offices around the league can sort of come to that agreement.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this, like, Deshaun Watson was a very slippery slope. I think Araiza will be back in the league, and I even think that if Ruggs skates charges, and it's kind of looking that way because he's been on house arrest for I don't know how long at this point, and they're not really locked in. The court system's not really locked in on locking him in.
Yeah.
So I could see him, if he skates all charges, coming back too, and that's ridiculous to me. I think they both should never play a game ever again. But
agreed.
It's just a slippery slope now.
I think when it comes to Araiza too, like his punts, regardless of everything else that happens, and I agree with both of you, he should never be in the NFL again. But when it comes to his actual play, he did this only in the preseason. The actual NFL games, the regular season, is completely different from the preseason. Any NFL player will tell you that. So you can make these awesome highlight punts in the preseason and be awful in the regular season. We never got to see Araiza in the regular season. No team should be that hot in from even that aspect. When you bring in his character, there is 100% no way he should ever step on an NFL field, be part of an NFL team again. I agree with both of you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not tooting his horn or anything. I think he's a disgusting human being. But I've been hearing like he is like a generational punter, so I think a desperate special teams organization would look his way. I don't think they should, but like I see the appeal where you're saying like you don't, like from a talent perspective, but I think it's a really difficult thing. I mean, like, look at a team like the Packers that like lost last year off their special teams. Like, they got to be thinking. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
When you look at across other leagues, they are very strict about not allowing players to play when situations like this happen. There's certainly some teams that will keep guys around, but on the whole, leagues do a generally good job of calling out their players and suspending them, finding them, whatever the situation may be. The NFL has always had a very, I would say, very tricky track record. I don't even think tricky is the right word. I just think it's a bad track record when it comes to disciplining their players for stuff that happens outside the field. There's been a lot of players gotten suspended for what happens in games more than they get suspended for what happens outside the games. And this whole Watson thing definitely makes a lot of fans less confident even than when they were before this all happened in the NFL. If they re-sign Araiza, if any NFL team re-signs Araiza, if any NFL team re-sign Ruggs, the confidence level is going to drop even more than that. It already is.
So let's just transition to the actual games. It's easy to start with the Eagles because in my mind, I think this was the most complete win that we had all season. I still stand on 10 toes when I say I think the Tennessee Titans are one of the most overrated teams in the league. I think they go as far as Henry takes them, and Henry has had a terrible month this month, and we've seen that they're just plateaued, and I don't think that they are in the category of like a good team that we have faced, because like we figured them out. Like they're a very predictable team, and when their bread and butter doesn't work, like they got nothing to turn to. And we saw that and took advantage, and it helps that our special teams had a great game, and Britton Covey had like so many deep returns.
Yeah, he had a great game.
Yeah, everyone took advantage of a really shitty team. Like their record is not accurate to their style of play.
I'll push back a little bit on you. Like, I think that we just made them look really bad. Like, I don't think Tennessee's a bad team. I think Tennessee will win 10 games probably this season. Tennessee's a very physical team. They push you around a lot up front, and they're very well coached too. Mike Vrabel's a really good coach. So the fact that the Eagles manhandled them the way they did says a lot about the Eagles. Like, I think that this game said more about the Eagles than it did Tennessee. Tennessee looked a little sluggish, and they looked weak, but they aren't. I think that was a good team the Eagles beat. Not really good, not great, just a good team. That was a good, solid team they beat. That's one that I think teams around the league should be a little scared of because the Eagles beat the Titans in every facet of the game. Like they owned the offense, they owned defense, and they owned all the little intricate parts of offense and defense. And then they owned special teams as well, like something that they haven't really done all season, you know. And they also owned all 4 quarters.
Yeah, I also want to mention for the Titans, since they lost their first 2 games this season, they've gone 7-3. Their 3 losses since they started out 0-2. Their first one was to the Chiefs on Sunday night game when Malik Willis was their quarterback, and they should have won that game. Had they even kicked the field goal, they would have won. And they lost in overtime, 20-17. Their second loss was last week to the Bengals. They lost 16-20 against the Bengals team that is looking very, very good right now. So they're competitive with them. And then they got blown out with the Eagles, which is their second biggest margin of score loss since the Bills game in week 2. And that Bills team looks like a Super Bowl contender, same with the Eagles. So their 2 blowouts have been to Super Bowl contenders. And I understand that doesn't look great, but that means they've been competitive in every other single game, including to the Chiefs, who arguably are the best team in the AFC.
Okay,
so
but
they are not an overrated team at all. They just have a couple really bad games against good teams. Like, they're not a great team. They are a above average team that will lose some big games, but they will be competitive in others. And this is one of the games where they got outplayed, but I don't think they're a bad team at all.
I want to push back on that because you mentioned a couple recent losses, and I've been saying that like Henry has been really bad this last month. Like he's been stinking it up the last month, and I'm seeing a common theme that when they can't move the ball through him, they can't play football. I don't really know if that classifies like a good team just from a predictability standpoint. Like basically, like Henry is the key to that team, and if you can't utilize him in a way that's going to benefit you guys, you're just going to lose every single game you play because Tannehill can't throw the ball. Treylon Burks hasn't been doing anything since like the past 2 weeks. There's nothing to turn to, really.
No, I hear you, but at the same time, like that's how a lot of teams are, and they sort of have had this formula for a little bit. Like even though they won a lot of games last year and got the 1 seed, you knew at the same time like if you shut down Henry and made Tannehill beat you with his arm, that you were going to have a good shot at beating them. And like Cincinnati proved that in the first round. I think that their talent has decreased a little bit, and that's why they aren't as good as they were last year, this year. At the same time, like that's how a lot of teams are. You know, if you take away one facet of their game, you know, they're very predictable, as you said, and they're very beatable. But like think about this. How many teams are there where like if you take away one part of their game, they're still, you know, they still have another elite way of beating you. Like I think the Eagles are the only team really that you can say can do that. Like if you shut down Hurts' legs, he has shown the ability to beat you with his arm. And if you shut down Hurts' arm, he's obviously clearly shown the ability to beat you with his legs. And that's the offense as a whole too. You know, if you shut down the Eagles' pass, their run game beats you. If you shut down their run, their pass beats you. Tennessee shut down the Eagles' run game this week. The Eagles ran 21 times for 64 yards. Not very good. Not Eagles-esque numbers. Hurts threw for 350 yards. I mean, we torched them through the air. And we've shown the ability to torch teams on the ground, too. No one else can really say that. Like, even think about Kansas City. If you find a way to manage their pass game, you know, obviously you're not going to shut down Mahomes to like under 250 yards, but if you can sort of manage their pass game where it doesn't kill you and destroy you, you're going to have a good shot at beating them. Cincinnati showed that in the AFC Championship as well.
I would throw 2 teams in the mix with the Eagles. I would throw the 49ers and the Vikings because if you shut down the receivers on the 49ers, you have CMC, and vice versa. If you shut down CMC, you have Debo, Kittle, and Ayuk. And if you shut down Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison on the Vikings, you have the best receiver and Adam Thielen and Jalen Reagor, who isn't playing.
Well, I hear you, but like I'm saying overall as an overall offense, like can you really say like the Vikings have been proven to be vulnerable pretty much? the Eagles really haven't been vulnerable. Like their game that they lost to Washington, they shot themselves in the foot. Like the Washington didn't really do anything to like make the Eagles lose. The Eagles just, Quez fumbled the ball. Goddard fumbled the ball. Obviously we can argue the face mask, but he fumbled the ball. AJ dropped that interception. Like the Eagles continuously shot themselves in the foot. So like it wasn't anything that Washington did or removed from the Eagles. They beat themselves. But like when the Eagles beat Minnesota and when Dallas beat Minnesota, like they shut down that offense. Completely shut it down. And then their defense wasn't good enough to hold them back in. So like that's kind of what I'm saying, where like the Eagles haven't been proven where like, the Titans shut down the Eagles' run game, and then Hurts struggle. They can't throw the ball through the air. So that was disproven this week. The Titans shut them down really on the run game, and Hurts still completely Swiss cheesed them up. So like the Eagles are really the only team that I think in the NFL can say that.
They are, but I also want to push back on your comment about the Chiefs because Mahomes just held the under 223 yards and only threw one touchdown. Usually when that happens, you should win by double digits against the Chiefs. That would be my argument. But the Chiefs are running the ball very well recently. Isaiah Pacheco had 14 carries for 66 yards and touchdown. McKinnon had 8 rushes for 51 yards. If the Chiefs can run the ball now, that opens up their offense so much more than it did before when they were sticking Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's just not a good running back.
Yeah.
I'm starting to admit it to a lot of fantasy fans, Chiefs fans. He's just not a good running back. He's solid enough to get you a couple yards, but not going to be your running back one. Pacheco's looking like he could be a RB1. That's scary for the Chiefs because they haven't really had that during Mahomes' time.
Yeah, agreed. And like he looked really, really good last week too. And you brought up his numbers. Well, it was 12 for 60 something, right?
14 carries, 66 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah, like he looked really good. And like you're right. I never really realized how poor Clyde Edwards-Helaire really looked until I saw Pacheco run and McKinnon too as well. McKinnon is good. I like him.
Yeah, he's really good to have.
Like, and see typically O linemen like to run block more. Like they just like to get downhill and like run and hit dudes really hard. Like they don't really like to drop back and pass block the whole time. Like they love run blocking. And Pacheco and McKinnon really took advantage of the Chiefs O-line. Like Creed Humphrey's a great center. He reminds me a lot of Jason Kelce, especially in the run blocking. Like Creed Humphrey is really, really good run blocking, and the holes that he was opening up, it was pretty evident. And like McKinnon and Pacheco looked super, super explosive with the ball in their hands. And like you're right, and that could be really scary for them. I'd like to see them keep that up for the next 5 weeks.
Yeah. Also, another thing with Helaire, he's not available more than 7 games in a season. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to move on. From him
and like Edwards-Helaire's specialty was that he was dynamic out of the backfield, like catching balls. But like Pacheco showed that he can pretty much produce the same way CEH can.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if the Chiefs keep running the ball. But that's what I'm saying. If they can run the ball this effectively through the rest of the season, that means they don't have to necessarily rely on Mahomes to win them every single game, which would be huge because that's how a lot of teams are able to win games. That's how the Bengals came back last year. That's how they won this game, is that they really silenced Mahomes. And even with the numbers that McKinnon and Pacheco put up, I don't even think this is their ceiling yet, which is scary considering how well they ran the ball.
Yeah, and I want to touch more on that game against the Bengals because Mahomes is a 1-3 against Joe Burrow and the Bengals in his career. They were down by a lot in the beginning, and Mahomes pushed it back up until like a field goal deficit. Mm-hmm. They didn't quite win, but I'm convinced at this point in Mahomes' career that you will not ever blow him out. Like, he will make you fight for every game at this point. Yeah,
sort of like what Tom Brady was. Like, you knew you were getting a dogfight no matter what with New England, Tom Brady. And 100%. I mean, as long as they have Mahomes, Kelce, and Andy Reid, I completely agree. Like, every game with Mahomes is going to be close. It's going to be a fight because, he's going to keep you in every single game. he's not going to throw you out of any games. And when you, in the NFL, when you have a quarterback like that who won't throw you out of games, you're going to be in every single game.
You definitely will be in every single game with Mahomes, but I think Joe Burrow has also proven that he is, if he's not already an elite quarterback, he's becoming one. Similar in the names that we've mentioned before in the AFC with Allen and Mahomes. Burrow is right up there.
Yeah, I think everyone was...
In my opinion, he might have passed Allen with the play that he's played against the Chiefs. Because Josh Allen, for as great as he has been, for as great as he played in the AFC divisional game against the Chiefs last year, he didn't win that game. Burrow was down big time at halftime in the AFC Championship and helped propel that team to get to the Super Bowl. Burrow just has that clutch gene. He might not have the athletic ability of Allen. He might not have the same arm power or arm accuracy or any of the skills that Mahomes has throwing the football, but he just has that it factor that will win you clutch football games. And that's something that it's just not talked about, I think, because of how talented Allen and Mahomes are. But, man, Burrow he's up there.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, I think Burrow, I don't think it's out of the question at all to say Burrow's better than Allen, especially after this year and what's happened. And you're right. I think that Burrow doesn't get talked about in the Mahomes-Allen conversation enough because he doesn't have, the eye-popping talent that those two have. But does it even really, when it gets down to it, does it even really matter if Burrow is out here winning all these games and putting up good numbers? It really doesn't. Burrow, I think, is right up there with those three, 100 or those two, 100%.
Yeah, I think he's third in the conversation within those three, respectfully. But I think everyone wrote off Burrow really fast after they lost the Super Bowl in the first 5-ish weeks of this season because he didn't come out slinging it. Yeah, I always thought he was elite. I will say he is an elite quarterback in this league.
Elite. He's elite.
And Allen is slipping a little bit, but he's still better than him. We know exactly what Josh Allen is, and we know what he's going to be in the postseason. We know he's going to be 5 years from now. And yeah, the talent is just so much more glaring than it is with Burrow. And they're all elite quarterbacks, but you can't keep Burrow out of the conversation because he's not an athlete like the others.
Yeah, I agree. And we talk about this, or at least I've said this on the pod about Hurts a lot, where Hurts' leadership carries a lot for him, and it sort of makes up for a little bit of his deficiencies. Hurts isn't necessarily the biggest, tall height-wise. He's not really the biggest guy, but the leadership and the intangibles make up for a lot of his deficiencies, and I feel that same way with Burrow. It's sort of the chemistry that he has with these guys. It seems that he has a tight relationship with all his receivers, not just Jamar Chase, even though that's the biggest one, obviously. But you see the same thing with him and T. Higgins and him and Tyler Boyd and him and Joe Mixon, and Samaje Perine is able to just fit right in. And Burrow is the head of that team and the head of that locker room. And it says a lot that the Bengals win a lot under him, despite Burrow not really being the most talented guy out there. That says a lot to his leadership and intangibles. So I feel the same way as I do with Burrow with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think he needs to do it for another year or two to be in the conversation respectfully, but he's right there. And
I think he's there.
I can't find a weakness in his game this year.
Yeah, I can't either.
So
The other thing that I don't understand is where this narrative comes from, that he doesn't have the same talent as the other guys. He threw 60 touchdowns as an SEC quarterback.
Yeah.
That is insane.
Yeah, it's pretty much just because he can't throw the ball 70 yards.
Bailey Zappi, and I love Zappi and what he did in college, but Zappi did that playing in the Conference USA.
Yeah.
What Burrow did has never been done by a single quarterback in college. Certainly wasn't done by Josh Allen. And even as great numbers that Mahomes put up by himself, pretty much at Texas Tech, he wasn't even close either. So you are playing some of the best defenses in college football and putting up those numbers. I don't know where this disrespect came from once he got to the NFL, but it still has stayed there his entire career, and I just don't get it.
Yeah, he had the best college season ever in my mind, ever.
That may have been the best college team ever, too.
I don't think it's debatable.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Do you guys want to move into college now since the playoff bracket's been released. Before we get into that, I want to talk about how starting in the 2024 season, they're expanding to 12 teams in the playoffs. And this is really appealing to me because I think people like me will start watching the college football playoffs because aside like the last 2 years, the top 4 teams have not been diverse at all. It's been variations of Alabama, Georgia, and Clemson.
Oklahoma.
Yeah. Like 5 or 6
Ohio
teams
State,
rotate.
Yeah, right.
But now the last 2 years it's been way more diverse and it's been way more interesting to watch. But now if you open up the tournament, you just get way more competitive games and you're going to get a much more bigger build up to this final game. And I think seeing upsets in the championship, like upset teams going to the championship would be awesome. And that's something we've never seen before because even the 4th seed is not really an upset. Yeah,
right. And like, I definitely agree with you. I think that the move is going to be really good for college football. Like, I think that a lot of people are really skeptical on it, but I think that they'll come to fruition with it because I think it's going to be a success. And you're right. Like, it's going to keep a lot of people in during the season. And like, it sucks. Like, I'm not necessarily a Penn State fan, but my parents are. And so I follow them and I root for them. And it's kind of disappointing when they lose the 2 games against Michigan and Ohio State. And it's kind of like the feeling is like, oh, their season's done. You know, the bowl game that they get isn't really important when it gets down to it. I know they're in the Rose Bowl, but like, what does it really mean? It kind of sucks.
Can I push back on that quickly?
Yeah.
So, for a little bit of context, my grandmother went to Northwestern. I had an aunt that went to Michigan. I'm a big Penn State fan. I love Big Ten football. And part of that love, part of that tradition is the Rose Bowl. And I understand that a lot of newer college football fans might not understand the history beyond the Rose Bowl, the tradition of having a Big Ten and Pac-12 school.
Yeah.
But I am going to be so sad if they make the Rose Bowl a playoff game and not between a Big Ten and Pac-12 school, which is already ruined by the fact that UCLA and USC are going to Big Ten. I think that's a disgrace for college football.
Yeah.
It's not fair to the players either for those teams. Yeah. Like, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
No, it makes no sense, and it totally ruins the whole rivalry between the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. But even regardless of that, I would still watch the Rose Bowl with the Pac-12 Big Ten.
Yeah.
And I just can't stand the idea of commercializing the Rose Bowl as a playoff game. I don't like it at all. I think that should always be the Big Ten and Pac-12. And even if it's 2 mediocre Big Ten Pac-12 teams that aren't in the playoff, let's just do that instead. Because I want that tradition to stay.
Unfortunately, like, I agree with you, and I grew up, you know, pretty much the same way. I was following Penn State, and like, yeah, that was the cream of the crop back then. Was when you won the Big Ten, you know, you looked forward to the Rose Bowl, and it is disappointing that, like, to put it this way, when Tom Brady was in college, you know, he was, you know, the Michigan starting QB, you know, All-American and Rose Bowl champion. That was part of the resume, you know. But, like, unfortunately today, when CJ Stroud goes to the draft, that's not going to get brought up. Like, no one's going to care that he won the Rose Bowl. It's not like, it doesn't hold the same weight, which I agree with you. Like, it's super disappointing. And unfortunately, that's the road it's heading down, where the Rose Bowl is just going to be one of the 6, you know, or whatever playoff games for the college football playoff. Like, that's just what it's going to be. And I agree with you, Aiden. Like, it sucks that the tradition is going to be a little tampered.
Yeah, I mean, to me it was already tampered, but even as a Penn State fan, I'm so happy to see them in the Rose Bowl. And this might be the traditional college football fan to me. I love the fact they're going to the Rose Bowl almost more than the college football playoffs. I would have loved to see them playoff. I think they deserve it with their resume once you expand the playoffs, because obviously a 2-loss non-conference winner will never make the playoff in the format that it's at right now.
Yeah.
But I'm so excited to see them in the Rose Bowl. I'm excited to see Utah in the Rose Bowl too, because they played really well against Ohio State last year. This should be one of the best non-college football playoff games. In fact, it might be better than some of the playoff games before the championship. So this is a game that I think every college football fan should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to piggyback off that as well, because the slate for the bowl games this year is really good, in my opinion. Tennessee Clemson in the Orange Bowl is going to be a great game. And like Alabama Kansas State is so interesting because you have like a king of the SEC versus Kansas State who's come up out of nowhere pretty much this year to be very prominent. Like they beat TCU is a really good team. I think the committee did a really good job this year keeping TCU in and then moving Ohio State in and not Alabama. TCU's a really good team, and Kansas State beat them. Like that was a really impressive game. So it's going to be interesting to see them against Alabama, and then some of the lower ranked teams, and even games where the team is unranked. Like Florida is unranked going up against number 14 Oregon State. That I'm smelling an upset. I think Richardson declared for the draft, and he won't be playing right for Florida. You have these backups coming in, like it's different in college. These dudes are playing for pride, it's not money. And I think you see a different like quote unquote warrior, to kind of put a cheesy sports term into it. Like when an athlete is playing for pride, I think that a different side of them comes out.
Yeah, so I want to highlight a few things you mentioned. So you mentioned the biggest drama, which was, do you pick Ohio State over Alabama? So I want to go back to 2016 when Penn State won the Big Ten with believe it was an 11-2 record, with their two losses being the Pitt early in the season by a few points and a blowout to Michigan. And that was the year that they beat Ohio State in that huge comeback, and then won out the rest of their games, had a comeback win against, I believe it was Wisconsin, the Big Ten championship.
Yep.
They had a great resume, still missed the playoff because they had two losses. A reminder, they won their conference. There is no reason a two-loss Alabama team that did not even compete in the SEC championship game should go over Ohio State, who only had one loss the entire season, and a TCU team that had their one loss in the Big 12 championship.
Yeah.
That would have been a total slap in the face to every Penn State fan who had to suffer the fact that they missed the playoff because of one very marginal loss to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I have been super skeptical of the college football playoff committee in general. Like, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the decisions they make. And I've hated the NCAA as an organization for a long time too. I love college sports, but the NCAA as an organization is like super scummy and just dirty. So I applaud the college football playoff committee because I think they did it right this year. I think that at the end of the day, I think they actually got the best four college football teams in the country this year, which I don't think we've necessarily been able to say. I think every year there's been a little bit of controversy with like, oh, this team got snubbed, this team should have been higher, whatever. But this year, I think, could you imagine the uproar that would have happened if Alabama made it this year over TCU or Ohio State? Oh my goodness.
TCU got snubbed before.
Yeah.
I believe it was the second year of the college football playoffs. TCU finished undefeated, and that was when the Big 12 didn't have a championship game, so they were co-championships with Baylor, and neither team made it to the playoff.
Yeah, I remember that year. Yeah.
TCU got snubbed in 2010 when they finished undefeated in the Mountain West and had to play in the Rose Bowl instead of the BCS championship because they were in a non-Power 5 conference. So if TCU got snubbed a third time in the past 12 years, that would have been a huge slap in the face to college football fans as well.
Yeah.
The other game, and this is not one that most regular people will talk about, but this is one I'm excited for, is the second game on the slate of the entire bowl season, 3 o'clock on Friday, the 16th. Number 25 UTSA, which is University of Texas San Antonio, versus number 24 Troy. This is going to be one of the best games, I think, of the entire bowl season. Just because of the fact that Troy's season, their two losses was to number 21 Ole Miss in the first game of the season, 10-28, and then that crazy loss to App State the third game of the season, which was a college game day in App State. App State had that crazy Hail Mary pass. So that was their only two losses. And UTSA's only two losses have been to number 21 Texas, which they only lost by 21, which isn't that bad, and then a triple overtime loss to Houston, and they only lost by 2 points. This is going to be a very, very competitive game between two non-Power 5 teams, and it's going to be so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and I remember that App State Troy game, and like that was so crazy, that the ending of that game. And I remember watching that, and I like App State, and they sort of fell off after that. Like they only finished 6-6 overall, and they were 3-5 in the conference, which sucks. I thought they were going to be better than that. But I remember also saying that Troy, I thought, was going to like finish near the top of the Sun Belt, and they did. Like they won it. I'm right. They won the Sun Belt.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. So like I wasn't surprised to see them winning it, but I am surprised to see them actually ranked in the top 25. That's cool. And like UTSA is last year they were close to finishing in the top 25. I'm pretty sure they were ranked for like a week or two and then fell out because they lost one game. That's usually what happens to teams like that.
I think they lost a bowl game, but I'm not 100% sure if that's what took them out the rankings.
Yeah. So like seeing them back this good is cool to see. And yeah, I'm going to be tuning into that game. It's indoors, so hopefully both of these offenses air it out. That would be cool to see.
The other interesting thing about UTSA, you mentioned that this game is going to be indoors. UTSA plays in an indoor stadium. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the Alamo Bowl, but it's an interesting stadium. So that could potentially help UTSA, the fact they play in a dome. Obviously, there's not going to be a lot of fans. There's not going to be a lot of crowd noise. But just sort of the comfortable of playing inside and outside. I don't know if that's ever been studied about how much that helps teams or hurt teams, but it's just an interesting thing to think about going in this game.
Yeah.
I like you said, Jack, there's so many great games. I love the college football bowl season.
Yeah.
I don't really care how bad the teams are. It gives you a chance to watch teams that you would never usually watch on national TV at very bizarre times. Obviously, some of the bowl games have just really funny sponsorships, which I love as well. But it also gives players a chance to play somewhere like Myrtle Beach, the chance to play in the Bahamas. So there's just some really cool bowl games where they play locations. I just love all of it.
Yeah, agreed.
And before we wrap up here, we should talk about the NBA a little bit. James Harden came back to the Sixers, and he debuted against his former team, the Houston Rockets, and they lost in overtime to a lottery team.
Yeah, it was pretty abysmal. And like I think last time we were on, I was talking about how the Sixers really looked like they were turning the page. They ended up taking a step back since I said that. It feels like every basketball prediction I've made this year has gone backwards because Anthony Davis continues to shred it up in the league right now. He's still averaging like 35 over a certain stretch. So I don't really know what this problem is with the Sixers right now. I think that they're going to continue to hit bumps in the road like this, especially when they're struggling to find continuity, like with these guys bouncing in and out of the lineup. Harden looked terrible. I mean, he just looked super lazy and uninterested, and that's not going to bode well for my prediction of them going to the finals if he continues with that mindset, because I mean, we've seen the leadership questions from Harden in the past, and I think most of them are valid. He doesn't want that to continue. Like, I think that Harden came here to sort of dispel that narrative on him, but it's seeming like it's continuing, and it's not looking good for him right now.
The other thing about the Sixers, how do you play a double overtime game and your bench only has 24 points? I just don't. The bench, and we talked about this before, or at least I've talked about it a couple of times, where the bench plays really well. Jack, I believe you did say this. The bench plays really well when the starters like Harden and Embiid aren't in. And the moment that they come in, the bench just decides to take it easy.
Yeah, I think it's like way too much isolation ball when those guys come back in and like they just don't know how to exist on the floor.
Yeah.
Like with Embiid and Harden, that's definitely like a red flag for the team. I'm booking us for a second round exit again. I don't really know how you fix this, honestly. I really don't.
I don't either, and I don't even know if the second round is viable right now. Right now, they're looking like play-in team, like 7, 8 seed, maybe.
Yeah.
They were playing well, and it looked like they turned a corner, and now they aren't. And I'm feeling like that's the way the season's going to go at this point, where they're going to have a decent stretch of a couple of nice, solid wins, and then this stretch of looking like a team that shouldn't even be in the playoffs, which is what most 500 teams are. Is you'll have nice stretches of good wins and then some really horrible stretches. Luckily, basketball's set up where you can be a 500 team and you'll still make the playoffs. Making the playoffs for any Sixers fan, any person in the Sixers organization, that's not good enough at this point.
Yeah, no, that's a step down, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, you see some teams that took a step down like this. Great example is the Lakers, who have been playing better as of recently. But still, when you take a step down like this, there's going to be talks of when do we blow this thing up?
Yep.
And that's still conversations that the Lakers are going to be having right now. And it's going to be talks within the Sixers organization if things keep up the way they are.
I think it gets talked about this offseason if the Sixers lose.
Yeah. Agreed.
At the minimum, you fire the coach, but I'm really starting to think the problem's deeper than him.
Yeah, and a lot of people are going to start questioning Embiid. Like, that's just where it's going to turn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Embiid's played well, but the issue is when you start getting to this point in his career with the injuries he's had, you have to wonder how much longer you can keep a guy like this before his value goes down to nothing. Where right now you could get a couple solid pieces, even just regular guys that won't be great, but they'll still be enough where you can tank and it would be fun to watch them, and then you can get draft picks as well for him.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the Sixers have to start thinking about is if this season goes as badly as I think it's going to go, especially because when you look at the East, there is a couple very, very talented teams that haven't even turned the corner yet, and they are below 500, and I think they're better than the Sixers.
Mm-hmm.
Want to name a couple?
Sorry, I was just going to say, when you look at the Atlantic Conference, Atlantic Division, which nobody in basketball talks about divisions, but when you look at it, every team is either above 500, below 500, and the only team that's not is the Knicks, who was one game below 500. So every team's basically 500 or above, which is crazy. And so when you look at that, I'm just worried that the Sixers aren't even going to be competitive if they don't turn things around.
Yeah, I really didn't think about this whole blowing it up thing until now, but it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's looking like we're going down that road too. So
the Lakers are playing well, but I don't think it's going to last long at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I agree with you there. This seems like a really hot streak right now, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be sustainable, I feel like.
Yeah, they did lose to the Raptors today by 10.
Yeah.
They lost 113 to 126. So they've now lost 2 games in a row. So that makes this Sixers, they're playing the Sixers Friday night, for anyone that didn't know. That's going to make this game very interesting. Because now you've got 2 teams that are struggling a lot. You got the Sixers at 500, and they need to turn things around very quickly. You got the Lakers, who have been sort of on and now aren't. If they can get this win, it might propel them to a few more to get to 500, which for them would be a huge win. So I think that this game will say sort of, not necessarily say which team will actually propel themselves to a finals run. I don't see either of these teams doing that right now, but it will at least put a team in a better position than they are currently.
So it'll be interesting to see as we move forward. Do you guys got anything else?
Not the only thing that I can add, and not that most people would care about this, but Eddie Jones, who is the head coach for England's rugby team, just got fired, and there's rumors that he could come to the United States, which would be a huge momentum piece for the United States rugby team, which has really struggled in the last couple of years. Even though they have a professional league, there was a lot of optimism that the national team would be much better than it is. So getting a coach like that would be huge for them.
Yeah, maybe we'll see a wave of rugby in the United States.
Yeah. And I got one thing to say, too. Trey Turner is a Philadelphia Philly.
Oh, shit. We completely walked over that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Aaron Judge just got re-signed today, too.
Yep. Yankees did the right thing.
Yeah.
They did. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens now that a couple of these big free agents are off the table, because there's still some guys available, especially at the shortstop position.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see what teams do now that a couple huge contracts have been signed very early in the offseason.
Yeah.
The Dodgers lost Bellinger too, so it's interesting to see how their season's going to go because they lost two of their key guys.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they're going to stack up against the Padres now.
They also said, I don't know if you guys saw this, they said that they probably won't sign Correa because of the whole Astros thing, which it's complicated. I understand where the Dodgers are at, but also you just lost your shortstop who was very, very good for you, and you're refusing to sign one of the best shortstops on the market to replace him.
Yeah.
I don't know where fans are at for the Dodgers, but I know me personally, I want the best guy available.
Yeah, you can't let the fans make a decision like that for you.
Yeah, I normally hate the baseball moral high ground, but I think all those Astro guys should rest in piss, and I'm happy that they're doing that.
Yeah.
But if I was a Dodgers fan, I'd want to sign Correa.
Yeah, I would too. I would get over it, honestly.
Yeah, especially now that you lost Turner.
Yeah, for real.
I think that'll do it for this week. We didn't talk about the World Cup because all the matches just got set, and this is where the real fun begins. So next episode, we'll talk about the quarterfinals and so on. Yeah, we'll see you next week. We upload every Saturday at 2 p.m. So we'll catch you next time.